Welcome to the HERHealth Podcast, transforming health for women and girls at risk, where we empower women and girls to take charge of their health and well-being. Join us as we shine a spotlight on issues affecting women and girls' health and explore ways to create positive change. Get ready to be inspired and empowered as we discuss health, advocacy, and empowerment for women and girls at risk. Please be advised that this podcast may cover sensitive topics such as gendered violence. We understand that these discussions can be difficult to listen to. If you feel uncomfortable or need support, we encourage you to prioritize your well-being. Consider exploring our other podcasts if these topics are triggering for you. Resources can be found in the description.
Thank you. So, welcome to the HERHealth Podcast, where we highlight the voices, programs, and ideas transforming health and social services for women, girls, and gender-diverse people impacted by violence and adversity. I'm Alexandria Lazochek, your host, and today's episode is all about engaging a crucial and sometimes overlooked part about the conversation, men and boys. So, we are joined by Stafford Perry, an award-winning actor, educator, and long-term community leader in the prevention of gender-based violence. So, for over a decade, Stafford has worked to engage men and boys in conversations around harm, accountability, and healthy relationships through his work with the WiseGuyz program, a groundbreaking innovation or initiative developed by the for Sexuality. So, as the WiseGuyz Scaling Project Manager, Stafford now supports communities across the country to implement the innovative program. So, in today's conversation, we're going to explore what it really means to engage boys and men across the spectrum of harm, how to foster empathy without vilifying, and why meaningful prevention work starts early and should include everyone. So thank you so much for joining today. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. I'm so happy to be here. Yeah, thanks for this conversation, Alex. I'm excited to share.
Yeah, so let's just dive in. So can you tell me about the WiseGuyz program and how it started and what makes it unique in the landscape of youth violence prevention?
Yeah, happy to. So, Wise Guys is a program of the Center for Sexuality. It started in 2010, so almost 15 years ago. Um, yeah, so we've been working in schools, communities, and in youth justice settings now in Calgary area and now across the country. Um, Wise Guys started initially in 2010. Again, there was sort of a need for starting some of these conversations. The Center for Sexuality does comprehensive relationship and sexual health education. And one of the key things that we were learning from the research is that pregnancy rates were declining and STI rates were increasing here within Calgary and Alberta. So what that kind of like said to folks here at the center is that a certain part of the population is not engaging with conversations around sexual health. So most of the conversations around sexual health were targeted towards people who could have babies. So it was around pregnancy prevention. And so we kind of thought, well, what does it look like to engage young men, boys, in conversations around comprehensive sexual health related, and started basically as a sex ed program for boys. And we realized quickly we couldn't talk about sexual health without encompassing it within the conversation of relationships and ultimately around sort of pressures and expectations that young men were feeling around relationships and ultimately connected to pressures they felt as individuals around communication. So it really expanded into a program that focused not just on sexual health, but focused on healthy relationships and supporting young men with social emotional learning skills so that they could connect in healthy ways. So that's really what it started, is a sort of sex ed conversation for boys. That kind of need for engagement with men and boys has really grown in the last 15 years. And WiseGuyz has been in a unique position because we were able to build a huge body of research over the last 15 years. We partnered with the University of Calgary. And so we're kind of the only evidence-informed program of its kind that works with men and boys across this country and really internationally. Kind of got a lot of attention around, wow, you're doing this work with men and boys and you've built this body of research that's connected to health promotion, but ultimately violence prevention work as well. So that's kind of what makes it really unique, is that it's a really supportive way of working with young men. It's gender specific, which is also too unique about it. So it actually addresses, let's talk specifically about what it means for men and boys to engage in these conversations, and not, see gender as a non-factor. We actually need to engage differently and create a space that supports them where they're at. in order to foster healthy bodies, healthy relationships, and healthy communities. Um, so that's kind of what makes it unique, is just sort of the amount of people that have helped build it, the time it's kind of been around, and how comprehensive it is. That again, there's lots of programs that focus on boys' mental health or, communication and life skills, but something that is as comprehensive as WiseGuyz is also unique because it focuses on, it focuses on such a breadth of conversations. And I can explain a little bit more about the specifics of that, but that's a lot. The WiseGuyz is a big program with 4 modules, 20 sessions that happens over a long period of time, so it creates a real impact.
Thank you so much for diving in. It's very interesting that this Wise Guys kind of came out of sort of a health investigation of like, oh, why are we seeing this with our pregnant population? And then it just naturally turned into a conversation like, oh, we should be talking to men and boys about healthy conversations and relationships and supporting our young men. So, what a very interesting history. And thank you for diving into what that's looking like today. I really
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Yeah, no, my pleasure. It is interesting, right? We talk about health, right? So we get lots of conversations around, consent. Like it gets a key piece with young men. And it's so important that we can't talk about those pieces without including a more holistic conversation around relationships. So it's interesting how we like to piece out certain parts, like just talk about uh, you know, sexuality, or just talk about, potential risks around sexuality. Like, well, we have to talk about it in the context of relationships and actually how people are behaving in their communities and in their, in their lives. So we have to kind of center a bit more of a holistic conversation, especially in working with youth,
Mhm.
because they're like, yeah, I have this piece of information, but how do I actually integrate it into my life?
Exactly. And so with the webinar, you kind of emphasize that importance of conversation and engaging boys with these conversations about harm without vilifying, but with validation instead. So how do you strike that balance of like fostering both empathy, but also accountability?
It's easier to do this with young folks because I find sometimes we, as practitioners, we have more empathy for young folks. We realize they're still learning, and that's a key piece of working with young men. Is you got to go in empathetic, not seeing them as a problem, not seeing them as someone you need to fix or change or causing harm to others, but actually as someone that needs support, that needs some space to share, that has a voice that matters. Seeing them as someone who you want to, you know, you don't necessarily need to be their friend, but to say, hey, you know what, I'm going to support you. I'm going to be here for you, and I'm not going to just see you as a means to an end. Um, so that's kind of a shift in that approach that again makes people willing to listen and connect because you're actually treating them as a full human being and not as a problem that needs to be fixed. And ultimately, a lot of the challenges that young folks are facing and harm people are creating for themselves and others connects to some area that they don't have support around, that they haven't built a skill around, that they haven't been able to like experience or witness possible alternatives or examples in their life. Um, and I think it's pretty easy to get people on board with the idea that young people deserve support and opportunities and a space to learn. And that's no different for young men. And especially around these areas of, sort of social emotional learning, around awareness, around communication, around relationship skills, around life skills. Sometimes that support hasn't been explicitly offered. It's been an expectation that boys will just learn it through other activities, through, more sort of stereotypical, like, yeah, they'll learn it through sport, through other ways that young men are engaging.
Mhm. I really liked how this connects back to your webinar about the tool to support empathy and curiosity. So the acronym
Yeah,
in affirm, clarify, and answer. And I really enjoyed how you broke that down, especially when having tougher conversations with young men. So thank you so much for diving into that as
oh
well.
yeah. Oh yeah. No, my pleasure. Yeah, it's interesting. Again, it's why I've loved this and gravitated to this work. I enjoy the wise guy space. I genuinely get to like so many of these young folks. It doesn't leave me being discouraged or overwhelmed. Sometimes you see the messages around young men, and you realize when you go in and connect in person, I always leave more hopeful. I'm like, these are young, kind. They're maybe not supported. So it helps if you genuinely connect and like the folks that you're working with, and that can take some empathy. It can take some practice, but for me, it's part of my job. It's part of my job, and it makes it more enjoyable. And I want the young folk who person who first comes in, maybe they're feeling, oh, this is someone who's going to talk at me again. I want them to leave being like, hey, I felt listened to. I felt valued. I felt like a whole human being. I didn't feel like this person was just there to, they actually were curious about me. They actually wanted to know what was going on, and I felt valued. And a lot of young men maybe don't feel valued around these kind of conversations, or they get their value in different ways. And, in WiseGuyz, you can shift where, they'll be like, hey, you can be valued for more than, just what you're doing it's sort of stereotypical. It's not necessary. Not all young guys are getting value through sports or through these things, but sometimes that's the default.
Mhm.
And sometimes you can just be like, you know what, you inherently are a person that deserves support, deserves to be valued. You can share your challenges, and you can get help and connection.
And not me, I'm not sorry, I don't have experience in this at all, but I can imagine how much the youth like appreciate that, and to have someone that actively wants to hear what they have to say, and it creates that welcoming environment to share and be vulnerable and ask questions that, even though it comes from a place of learning that may be coming from a unintentional harmful place, they then have a chance to speak and get to learn better. So I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Yeah. A non-judgmental supportive space for young guys, that goes a long way. And
Mhm.
that's a key piece to the Wise Guys program. So yeah, 100%. And they do enjoy it. That's why they end up coming back. They come back because they feel like, hey, you know what? This space feels pretty good. I enjoy this. I feel like I'm less stressed here. I feel like I can share. You create some connections because they kind of let their guard down a little bit. And sometimes, not just with the facilitator, but with the other participants, the other people that are going through that experience. And it becomes a space that when it's done at the end of the year, often they miss the space, as there's all the learning that happens as far as, with skills building stuff, but often they just miss like that wise guy space.
Definitely. Kind of moving forward, I found the quote of across the spectrum of harm. So, what does it mean to engage men and boys across the spectrum of harm? And how does Wise Guys approach early intervention versus addressing more serious behaviors or things later down when they go into adulthood?
Yeah. So this is a kind of key piece again. We shared a little bit within the webinar around like the pyramid of violence, which is seen, which kind of shows that spectrum of harm that can be caused. The key thing around the pyramid of violence is that ultimately you look at the tip of it, the overt physical sexual harm that can be caused. And then down at the base of it is, again, some of these sexist attitudes, values, beliefs, comments people make. And we realize that overt harm that happens, that explicit harm, doesn't come from nowhere. So there's a kind of a great quote that I love, that not all disrespect leads to violence, but all violence starts with some form of disrespect or some sort of disconnection that happens. And that kind of opens up these opportunities to interrupt that at the base of this pyramid. So that's where WiseGuyz position as an intervention program, and again, a supportive foster. Let's go to the bottom of that pyramid and really create opportunities there. But also, again, utilizing WiseGuyz skill building and reflection pieces sometimes can also be utilized when harm has happened, that overt harm, because sometimes that harm has happened because of a lack of learning or support. So you can use some intervention, or sorry, some prevention skill building tools as intervention. So using prevention as intervention around some of the, like, let's re-examine some of the causes in that root cause space, especially with young folks who maybe again can, and then that can prevent that recidivism, that kind of like folks doing more harm in the future. Um, but wise guys, we get to really build that skill building at a young age. You start to realize, okay, well, here's some of the key pieces that we can talk about, right? Like actually, like a lot of conversation around masculinity can connect it to like feelings, emotional literacy, actually being able to understand and emotionally regulate. So some of those skills that people could learn at a young age might open up a little bit more understanding for themselves, a little bit of space of being able to share how they're feeling, so that it doesn't lead to a specific action or a way of dealing with overwhelm or acting out in a way that does cause harm in the future, because we've created tools to support them understanding, learning, connecting, staying connected to their own experience, maybe giving tools to sort of like share before they feel the only option is some form of harm. Um, and gosh, it's nice to offer support and like foster things as opposed to intervene. and like reprimand and punish, or like, gosh, if we can prevent those spaces, that harm happening, what a opportunity, what a gift. And it's so great to offer support. We do that with, some of our bystander intervention. We kind of like find ways to intervene earlier because, um, gosh, it's so much easier to like support a pro-social behavior than interrupt and stop, a more antisocial or harmful behavior.
Hmm. I think we're going to have a conversation with Nolan Hill about the bystander as well. So I'm really excited that you brought.
Yes.
I'm going to fit that in as a little like a link.
Oh, dude, Nolan's fantastic. And yes, really connected to with, the learnings of the center and the WiseGuyz work. That's awesome. That's so great.
Yeah, I really enjoy the violence pyramid model as a conversation point I have with everyone in my life about talking about kind of the baseline levels of violence. I feel like that is an excellent model to explain to people that are diving into this conversation. So when we're talking, what does it mean to engage? Sorry, wrong question. How does wise
Good.
guy?
Okay.
I was reading the wrong one, but it was supposed to feed in. I'll edit that later. So how does the Wise Guys program kind of like help young men unpack the societal norms around masculinity? And have you kind of seen these conversations shift over the last 10 years?
Yeah. Yeah. It's constantly evolving, right? There's some standard sort of, stereotypes that you put into a space and you kind of realize, oh, people are still connecting to this idea around masculinity. But it's shifted and changed, which is sometimes highlighting more challenging conversations, but also super hopeful because we realize this is not a stagnant thing. This is it's changing, which shows that it can change. And it can change for the positive. It can change in a way that creates less harm and not more harm around it. Because again, some of these ideas around quote unquote what it means to be a man, what it means to be a young man, those ideas feel very solid for folks around the expectations and how they might play out in their lives, but they are things that can shift and change. We can redefine that specifically for a young person or a group of young people. And a lot of that comes by not coming in and telling them that what they have learned about what it means to be a man is wrong. It's about asking genuine questions so that they feel that they can make a choice and reflect on how that's working for them. Is that making people feel connected or supported, or is it making people feel isolated, making people feel inadequate, making people pressure pressured? um, and so it's actually about offering some space for them to reflect, think about what they want and value, and actually make things that maybe support the things that actually can, sometimes there's a bit of a false equation that they've created in their mind. Like they want connection, and a way to do that is get some validation and approval by behaving in a certain way that actually disconnects them from people. That actually, they're like, I got respect in this way, but what I needed to do was shut down and not share this part of myself. And if we can redefine that within a group of young folks, they start to realize, what, this is how I want to define what's worthy of respect, what friendship looks like, what leadership looks like. You start to realize that these ideas of what they have to be, quote unquote, a man, these gendered expectations, are setting them up to either fail or not feel super great, and sometimes to cause harm to themselves and others. But that comes through asking a lot of questions and actually getting to the point of like, hey, you want to feel respected, you want to feel connected, you want to feel validated. Gosh, that's pretty normal. That's pretty like a young person wanting that. That's cool. How do we get that? How are you validating each other? How within your friend group? What are you, are you creating a space where you're validating them if they're putting someone else down or boasting about this certain thing or hiding, like what is it that we are validating? And that's kind of can be what is recreated, and also experiencing some of those things. So you do it within the WiseGuyz. You don't just talk about it. You're like, what does this space feel like if we, connected being a young man with a space where it's like, hey, I'm going to be generous, I'm going to be curious, and I'm going to be I'm going to be kind. My default isn't going to be to take someone down and make fun of them. I'm actually going to be someone who's going to like model kindness, and that's something that can, like, what would that be if look like if that was validated? And first, maybe just within this space of a couple of friends, a couple of, but we get to actually be active participants in it. It's hard to sometimes take that out into the larger environment where the school, and all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, okay, but that pressure overwhelms. And this is actually what the expectation is, because the young people are dealing with a lot of pressures and expectations. Um, but how do we make them active like participants in it? And a lot of like young folks want that. They want to shift it. They don't want to buy into some of these things. They want to seek an opportunity to be a little bit more connected. And it can leave space for what they do value. So it's not going in. And again, because sometimes people say, hey, is this about, we've had pressure sometimes and feedback around wise guys around what do is this quote unquote like feminizing boys? Is this and 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 this idea of like, what, there can be, it's not at all. It's about creating genuine choice and reducing harm. So if they still have a definition that is connected to, things that are masculine around sort of strength or, if it is a degree of toughness, what does toughness look like? What does leadership look like? What do these qualities look like? And how do they play out in a way that is not causing harm? And there can be a lot of space for that. There's lots of space for strength, leadership, and whole human beings. And it's not at the cost of others. And it's not at the cost of them sacrificing parts of themselves or shutting down and not acknowledging pieces that have been deemed as not a part of the script.
Thank you for diving in about this space, about validating youth to express their thoughts, the idea of being curious and hopefully to reduce what you mentioned very early on in your webinar, health harming masculine norms that can harm youth themselves or the others around them. So thank you so much for diving into that. I'm really curious about what you've learned as the WiseGuyz Scaling Project Manager about threading this model in diverse communities across Canada, and have been some key success factors or challenges when kind of spread and scaling?
Yeah, yeah. It's the key thing. It's again the framework we built with Wise Guys. First off, how uh, universal the key skills and practices are, and how specific it is with each community. So it's really something that is scaled so well because it's their, relationship skills, personal skills, reflection tools, practices that everybody can engage in, especially like young men, and that's where it's targeted. So how sort of universal the tools are, and then how specific the application is within each context and community. And that comes down to the youth that come in each group. It's not just like, hey, all young men are so diverse. So we know that. So we treat them as unique, diverse folks. So it's not we offer these tools, but we know they're individuals and unique. So it makes space for their individuality and also the relationship with the folks running it. So we work with communities to run it in their own community. So who are those facilitators? Who are the people going in that connect with the community, reflect the community, know how to create a space for folks within the community, maybe represent and highlight some of those pieces so that they are not getting Stafford's perspective on masculinity. And even that, even wise guys groups that I go in, I'm not there to share my perspectives on masculinity. I'm actually there to create a space, to ask questions, to support, to really help them as individuals. And so it's been so cool to see that happen within specific contexts. And the key learning about it too is it started out as program for young men. And initially it was sort of young men who were a little bit further on, sort of near to peer people who were facilitating, because there was a mentorship element, a connection around the gender specific reflection piece that young men could do really well. We've really challenged that and opened that up within our scaling site. So we have people of all ages and gender identities facilitating wise guys in a really impactful way. And the key piece not being their gender identity or their positionality, but ultimately the space and the connection that they create with the young guys. Are they creating that safe space? And are they creating a space where they're connecting with them? Do the young folks connect and trust this person in order to have this kind of conversation? So there are opportunities that come if a person is like, say, a more near to peer or someone who can connect with that, like that community or that experience of gender in that space. But it's not an essential piece because ultimately it comes down to, can you connect and can you create a safe space for this kind of reflection, sharing, and skill building?
Thank you so much for sharing. And
Mhm.
for when we're talking about connecting and creating those safe spaces, what would be some practical strategies or tools that educators, parents, or frontline workers can use when engaging boys in difficult
Yeah.
conversations, especially around topics such as violence, consent, or even gender?
Yeah. Yeah, this is a key piece. So we have a couple practices that we do when we come in, and first off, I always try and create personal connection from the moment I see folks. So just saying hi, using kind of using names, getting to know people, welcoming them. I ask a lot of questions right from the get go. Like, hey, how's school going? What's it like? Going to school here. You're in this grade. Well, what asking questions that kind of like get them. I care about who you are. Who you are matters in this space. You're not just a means to an end. You're actually someone that I'm going to. So a lot of questions. Then we set some like ground rules within the space. And this isn't coming in and setting a bunch of rules or a lecture space, but it's like, let's talk about how we want to relate and connect. And we ground that in some like sort of rights-based conversations. But we create WiseGuyz rights. And that's just sort of ways that we're going to practice that are not telling them what to do, but it's actually for them. These rights are for you. So I'm going to talk to you again around right to participate in this space. And I'm going to say this is because your voice matters, and talk through that. The right to pass, you don't have to do anything you don't want to do in this space. This is your choice to be here. I'm here for you. I'm here to support you. Right to privacy, the right to respect, like that rights-based approach that lays a foundation of here's how we're going to be in relationship. So also when we have challenging moments further down the road, when we start to like not disagree, but we want to explore something about like, hey, well, what's the consequence of that? Is that causing harm? How's that working for you? That when in those challenging moments, we can go back to those rights to reground and reconnect. And ultimately, my biggest tool is curiosity for folks. So asking those questions. Um, people have really strong opinions around this is what I believe and value, and this is working for me. Then I ask lots of questions about that. Like, tell me about how this is working so well. Share that story, speak to it. And often that's not to catch them up in a haha, got you. It's to understand. You can't work with people if you're not willing to kind of like start with where they're at. Augusto Boal is a person I work with who does a lot of theater of the oppressed because I operate in like some art spaces. But a key phrase that he used was, "You can't get there from there. You can only get there from here, and we have to learn where here is." So we actually have to understand where people are at. So I want people to share what they think, what they feel, what their values are. And I want to explore that because if we're trying to get to a place of reducing health harming behaviors, we're not going to start by being there. We're going to start by actually being where we are. And if that's in a disagreement with what I think and feel, and if that's working for folks, let's figure that out and say, well, how's it working for, how's this sustainable? Is this going to work moving forward? How's this affecting your relationships? How's this affecting your community? And we can get different insights and different inputs. And it's not about, hey, let's share a different experience to the same situation, and we can learn to connect and listen to it without compromising ourselves and saying, oh, you were right, I was wrong. But ultimately, we're learning and listening and expanding, and slight shifts can lead to some pretty profound changes.
Definitely. I hope people don't think it's too daunting to start with something so simple as asking questions and asking how everyone is and how everyone's situated today. But I think that it is very simple, yet it grounds the conversation or the space or allow people to feel like they matter in the conversation and how we relate and connect to one another. So thank you for giving such a simple yet profound tool for anyone
Yeah.
that's really interested. So
Yeah. It is the nature of this work, which is interesting, right? Like sometimes, again, there's so many, wonderful theories, great academics, all these things that are and it is complex, intricate, but some of the simplest tools are the ones that really resonate with folks. And you can create a lot of change with some pretty simple ideas.
definitely. And this is a great bridge to the next question of like, how do we build a bridge between engaging boys and addressing broader systems of harm that impact women, girls, and gender diverse people?
Yeah. So that's, yeah, again, that the individual sort of behavior change versus like context change and systems change,
Mhm.
which is so sort of intricate and connected, right? It's these sort of spheres of influence. So how do we support folks as individuals? And then how do we look at things from a context shift? So behavior change versus context change. And I think that allows you to kind of differentiate because you can create a personally really supportive space when you're working with young men because you're saying, hey, this is about supporting you, while still advocating all the time for some of these larger systemic changes that are harming folks and all different groups. So that's a key piece of doing a program like the Center for like WiseGuyz, out of the Center for Sexuality, so that we continue to be connected and accountable to other groups and communities, and centered out of WiseGuyz is not just a place where we end up, doing a lot of personal support work, but missing that connection piece to other communities, and ultimately that influence on other people that can be positive. It can be great. It can be about really improving that. It's not just about the harm, but we do it in relationship to that work, which means we can work at different levels. So I have lots of colleagues where their job is not to go in and support young men in this personal group space. Theirs is around advocacy around those larger support pieces. And what's asked of me in this work is different than what might be asked of them. And we can continue to work at both together. A lot of the work that I do is, again, absolutely in alignment with connecting with women, non-binary folks, and the harm that they're experiencing. And that informs how we approach WiseGuyz. So staying connected to those larger violence prevention pieces, because it takes a collective effort. WiseGuyz is not the solution to all all these violence. It's a piece of the puzzle. A lot of it is, again, those organizations that are supporting, women and children, folks who experience harm, all these other violence support pieces that are absolutely essential, massive pieces of this puzzle. This work with men and boys is also a powerful piece that can be included. And so how do we operate at both and do things in an accountable way, a connected way? And that's a key piece of the work that I get to do at the center. It's informed by so many. I get to be a part of quite a few different collaboratives and collectives, primarily working and supporting women, non-binary folks, and folks who experience harm. And that gives me motivation and connection to the work I do with WiseGuyz. And it doesn't compromise to the way that I create that supportive space, because ultimately I know that's what's going to create a shift. That's how I create the largest amount of change and actually support harm reduction. It gives me more motivation to do the work in a way that I've seen be impactful.
Definitely. Thank you so much about talking about the synergies, connecting with one another within the Center of Sexuality, as this is a group effort. Even though we are doing different tasks, we're ending up at the same goal. And I was talking to Carrie McManus at Say Jess here in Calgary, and I don't want to butcher her quote, but we're talking about innovation and how she's very much focused on individuals who experience violence, and the goal is, say, just that we have we have all these systemic things that are removed at the end of the day, or men and women and girls and non-binary folks are getting the education very early on that violence doesn't exist. So Carrie doesn't have to work anymore. Like, say just does no longer exists because we're doing the work early on. So I'll try to find the proper quote here so I don't totally take her words out of context. I think that really does connect to that conversation of like everyone's doing an important part of the piece of the puzzle to help everyone when talking about violence and adversity. So thank you so much for diving in.
Oh, no, 100%. And Carrie's incredible. And the folks at Say Jess have been like folks that we've collaborated with and connected with. And I have such respect for the way that they're doing so much of the work that they've done, and the way that they have made space to engage men in the conversation. So they're doing a lot of great work around that, while absolutely doing the support work that they do. So it's been really cool to witness that. Carrie's awesome.
Having multiple conversations with both herself and Andrea Silverstone is
so great.
It's amazing.
Yeah, 100%. Totally. Yes. Yes.
Kind of as we enter the last question, so I'm wondering, what gives you hope in this work, and what's your vision for the future of engaging men and boys and other folks in meaningful systemic change?
Oh gosh, I'm hopeful. Like I hope that comes across in it. Like I'm so hopeful, right? I have two sons. I have a 7-year-old and a 10-year-old. So through my journey of WiseGuyz, I have two kids of my own, two young guys that I really care about. And I get to connect with so many young folks, and I've just seen the natural connection and openness to these conversations, the kindness, the default. So many sweet, strong young guys that are open to like, let's examine, let's do better, and it's created spaces that I've shared with these young folks and WiseGuyz that are fun, that are enjoyable, that are like leave people feeling really great, that I think I'm like, people can get on board with this space of support, prevention, connection are things that are not going to compromise or take away from folks. We're not going in and trying to take things away from these young men. It's a supportive space that actually allows them to interact and connect with other people and create a supportive connection. And I feel like that's a desire of so many people. People aren't seeking isolation or dominance or seeking ultimately violence, which comes from a disconnection from other people or a disconnection from themselves. People are social and want that space of connection and belonging. And if we can foster that and support that, we're going to create more space uh, for each other, and that includes a space for some of these young men. We talk about like men creating space and giving more space to diverse folks. That's also giving more space to other men. Men were sometimes not leaving space for each other to be their whole selves, and young men. So how do we create more space, more support, more connection? And I've seen that happen through WiseGuyz. There's lots of work sort of to be done. Things are ever shifting, and there are some powerful voices that are offering alternatives that lead in a different direction. Um, and I really want to be a strong advocate for the spaces that are not leading to more harm, more disconnection, but ultimately creating more connection, more enjoyment, more spaces where people feel that they can be their authentic selves and experience that, again, healthy bodies, healthy relationships, and healthy communities. So I'm hopeful, and it's fun. It can be a really fun space. When people feel they can share, be themselves, ask for support, stay connected, not feel ashamed, not operate from a place of pressure and expectation, but ultimately like authentic.
Yeah, thank you so much for the work that you do, Stafford, and having all this optimism during especially I'm trying to find the right word, these
Oh yeah.
trying times that we're experiencing now. But thank you so much for having this conversation with me today. Before we wrap up, was there anything that you would like to add or anything that you would like to talk about? Anything that you felt like we haven't got a chance to discuss today?
No, this just I appreciate just a thank you to you and the AVA team and folks sharing this and starting these conversations. And just that again, I've been fortunate to do this for getting close to 15 years. Um, I'm always excited to connect with others who are doing great work, to learn from others. And if anyone wants to learn more about WiseGuyz or wants to bring WiseGuyz to their community, reach out to me. That's my job at this moment, is to support people to bring WiseGuyz to their community. So if you're just interested or just have a question, um, I'm always looking for opportunities to connect and support, and also to learn from people too. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for joining us on the HERHealth Podcast, transforming health for women and girls at risk. Remember, your health matters, and together we can make a difference. Until next time, remember to prioritize your health and well-being. For more resources and support on issues affecting girls, women, and gender-diverse people, visit our website at avatraining.ca. This is Dr. Nicole Letourneau. Thank you for listening.